Hello and welcome back to another episode of Soccer Supernova with me, Amy Canavan, a State of Mind's dedicated football chat show. Today I'm absolutely delighted to be joined by Vicky Hall, who joins us all the way out in the sunny States, as you can sort of see the sun's dancing through the window. So Vicky, thank you so much for joining us. How are you?
I'm doing well. Thanks for having me on. I appreciate it.
Oh, thank you very much. We were just talking before we came on air there. It's almost unbelievable to hear what you're saying. You're living in pretty much no restrictions, unrestricted. You're just living almost a normal life, aren't you?
Yeah, life is. We had a brief lockdown last spring, going into last summer, and then pretty much from then it's been, I wouldn't say full steam ahead, but almost full steam ahead. And I think at the end of this month it'll be knock yourselves out, go for it. Survival of the
Sure.
fittest.
We're just so jealous. We're so jealous. As you can sort of see, poking at the back there, there is a Celtic shirt. So, growing up in Glasgow, big Celtic fan.
Yes, grew up in Denniston, grew up in the East End, went to St Mungo's. Could hear the mighty roar from Celtic Park on a Saturday afternoon when it was going well for Celtic. So very,
When you were
yeah, I love myself.
when you were growing up, was there ever an ambition to be a footballer? Was it something that you could see
Yeah.
as a young girl growing up?
Um, so when I was younger, absolutely, because I didn't realise, we were different. I grew up, my best friend next door was a guy called John Cobain. He was a huge Rangers fan, and so I grew up in Denniston, right across from Old Whitehill School. It's not there anymore; it's a whole bunch of apartments and flats and whatnot. So there was a big pitch there, and that's where we played every day. So I didn't realise that it was anything different. That why I couldn't be like, the guys that played for Celtic. So a little bit older, then it was like, oh, this is different. Went to St Mungo's, and we had to. That's when I first played. When I was in, I'm trying not to say freshman. When I was in first year high school, that's when the school started. We started a team. There's a couple of girls a year older than me. Burns twins. One of them, Mandy, played for Scotland a bunch of times. Great players, and we fought to have our team. And it was a random French teacher, Mr. Miller, that coached us. We got the boys hand-off uniforms that didn't fit us. It was hilarious. But yeah, that was, and there was, some of those girls I played with were on another level.
Yeah.
So it was good.
That's fantastic. So, even from those early stages, were you faced with these sort of barriers along your way?
Yeah, because there was no, so you take now, right? Take here, where so the club that I work for here. So I work in football here, and the club that I work for here, football starts at 2, and it starts for everyone at 2, and all the way up through to 18, 19 to different pathways to push them onto college soccer or just for something to do. And it's for everyone, and probably the women's game here gets a little bit more. Like it's a lot more than it does back home. It's definitely, it's a women's sport. Now with MLS being better and bringing in players from abroad and more money getting invested into it, it's now kind of a little bit. Now it's a man's sport as well. It's not just
Yeah.
American football and baseball, but now people are like, oh, okay, this is actually a sport, because the generations coming through that play that and whatnot. But yeah, it was never like there was no teams for us to play on. There was one I remember, it was Cumbernauld Cosmos, and I grew up in Denniston. There was no chance in hell my mum and dad were driving me to Cumbernauld to train 2-3 nights. It just was never happening. Like some of the girls I know played there, and my mum and dad were like, I got to, I was 13, 14, and there was a teacher at my high school who played on a women's team from East Kilbride, and she was like, you should come play with us. And that was my first real into actual playing team football. So I played on a women's team when I was 14, and there was women that are my age now playing with them. So it was a whole, it was very, very interesting. Not like it is here where it's super organized and everyone has your team, your coach, and you pay for it and you pay, thousands of dollars a year. And it was very different. I remember asking my mum, it was an £11 registration fee. Asking my mum for the £11 to register to play through, I think it was the SWFA. And it was like, you want what? Yeah, I've got to pay £11, Mum. It was a big deal. Like, I'm giving you
Yeah.
£11 for that. So
What was that
she did
experience
eventually.
like? What was that experience like playing with, like, say, women in their 30s and their 40s, and you at the end of the day, you're still just a kid?
It was so in terms of football,
Yeah.
unbelievable, right? 'Cause the player that I was, I'm quite tall. You can't see, but I'm actually quite tall. I think that helped me. I'm 5'11". So I think like if I was a smaller person, I would never have survived. But being around these people that had been around the game and knew the game was just an education, just a huge education on how the game should be played. You know, because I didn't know. I played with the boys across the park. Sometimes we played 20 on 20. You know, so playing with in a somewhat of a structured environment, it was awesome. But and I think back about it now, I think like the kids that I coach who are like 13, 14, I can imagine playing on a team with them. That would be like, why are you here? You're a child, so you should be going to. So it'd be yeah, it was great. I would never knock it. I would never change it. It made me the player that I was or that I wanted to be. And those women were great that they took us in and they helped us be better players. So
Obviously, you were still a kid, and especially at that time, there was no real way that a woman was going to be a full-time professional footballer. So what were your plans on the side? What other career were you sort of thinking about?
I'm gonna become a police officer. So that was my
Wow.
whole thing. Yeah. Going through high school, I was I can't remember the name of the program. I was in a program. I was at Stewart Street Police Station up in I can't even tell you what it is. I can't remember. But I was a part of a program that was out of there, and I was going to become a police officer. That was my whole goal in life. And then I was very fortunate. One of the guys who I'm not even calling him a training officer, 'cause that's not what he was, but he was one of the guys who was giving us help and kind of guiding us along our way. He said, you need to get life experience. You don't want to come in and just do this off the bat. I was like, where's life experience? So I had a friend who was actually over here coaching, and so I applied to do summer coaching, and I came over with Challenger, and I left. I was the only woman in this coaching group that came out. There was like 200 something guys. The coaching group that I was with, there was like 32 of us dropped off in Dallas, Texas, and me. And my whole experience of the States had been watching movies and watching like Friends. And then I got dropped off in Texas, and I'm like, there's no central perks. There's no. I mean, you couldn't walk for anything. Everything was you had to drive, and I couldn't drive. It was like another planet. It was insane. And so I was stuck in a car with three guys for 12 weeks driving around Texas, Oklahoma, Kansas, places like that. Let me tell you, if you ever get to do that, it'll be insane. You can watch your dog run away for like 2 weeks, but because it's just so flat and boring. But you'll realize just how much you miss and how beautiful Scotland is. Like it made me appreciate my country even more. But yeah, and then I was playing it was like just an exhibition game with coaches from this area, and I went and played because I had nothing else to do. And a lady came up to me afterwards. She's like, "Have you thought about staying here?" I was like, maybe. She's like, "I'm the coach at Northwood University. We'd love to offer you a scholarship." I was like, "Oh, let me sign." So I was supposed to go home like I think it was like 2 weeks later, and I called my mum and dad. I'd never been away from home before, by the way, not on my own. And I called my mum and dad, and I was like, "Hey, I'm not coming home. I'm going to go to school here." And my dad, what he said, I don't think is repeatable on here, but it started with an F. And to get myself home on the
How
next
old
plane,
were
but
you?
I was 19.
Wow.
Yeah, so I'd never been away from home. Like when I came over for the 12 weeks, my sisters thought it was the funniest thing ever. They're like, "We'll see you in a week. We'll come get you from the airport in a week." And my mum was crying, and my sisters were like, see ya in a week. Never going to survive. Which was fair because I'm pretty useless at a lot of things. Yeah, and I called them. My mum and dad were like, no. And I got a full ride to play at a small school just outside Dallas. And I was there for 3-4 years, and it was unbelievable experience. I had friends that came over and that played in Florida and different places, and they played at bigger schools. I'm like, "Oh, you make a mistake. You need to go to a big school. You need to go to a big school." But I played every minute of every game. I never wanted for anything, and I don't know, mentally I could have handled not playing if that came into it. But yeah, it was great. I loved it. Everybody knew who you were on campus. You got to wear your team warm up and everything. It was cool. You got invited to all the better parties. It was great.
When you got picked for the Scotland under 20s, were you in America or were you still over here?
So it was very different back then. It wasn't like it is now. So it's not. It was I was in Scotland. I was 14 or 15,
Oh wow.
and they were. I want to say they were between coaches, and it was like I can't remember his name, and they were just picking squads to come out and train. So I was invited out to. I can't remember where it was, and I went a couple of times, and it was I mean, it was interesting. And there was one I was out, and it was actually with a full squad. I think a lot of girls actually went on to play full squad, and Julie Fleeton was in there, who
Wow.
is obviously super famous. I remember she was in there because she ran past me like I was a ghost. So so yeah, it was. So we never there was like it is now. That wasn't around then. I remember the uniforms were Go Class. I don't know if you remember Go Class. It was a
I
uniform brand
don't.
like back. There you go. That's how old it was. It was a uniform brand back in the day, and that's what you would wear. So yeah, it was. I was. Cause I remember I was playing for East Kilbride at the time, and it was. They invited myself, my friend Nicola, I think somebody else, and we were all invited out, and like good players, but not. Yeah, played against, and we were. I want to say Shelley Kerr was in there, but don't quote me on that. I could be fantasizing that in my head that she was there. I'm 99% sure she was in there as well, and then that was like
Wow.
that. Yeah, and yeah, it was. I mean, I can't remember the guy's name, but there was a guy who was the coach for the longest time, and then he stepped down, and there was somebody in between, and then a guy called Miller Hayes, I think, came in. I believe there was a guy in between, and he was the one that was doing this stuff. And I think it was more of a get to see people and get to see what was on offer.
Yeah.
But yeah, it was great.
So then, obviously,
So
in total comparison, what was your scholarship like? What did that sort of entail out there?
so school was your job. So you had to go to school and you had to keep a grade point average GPA had to be above, which was quite low actually to be fair. It had to be above a 2.5, which is not that high, but it had to be above that. And just I went to how did I put it? So I'd grown up in Glasgow. Every other word that comes out of your mouth starts with an F and ends with an F. I went to school in the Bible Belt, where everyone is like super religious, and then there's me. So there was quite a few times where I'll never get myself in trouble with opening my mouth and saying something, and everyone's like, "Can't say that." Finding out like different words meant, and like meant to us, and it meant different to
Yeah.
Americans, and it was like, "Oh, sorry, my fault, my fault again." So yeah, it was. I mean, so the scholarship was you had to go to school, you had to attend, you had to make your grades, and you had to be part of them and show face, make sure that you were, but it was brilliant. Um, we would train in the afternoons after school, so most of our classes were done by like 12, and then in the afternoons we would train till 2 till 4, and that was it. And it was great. Like the fall season, my first year here, the fall season was unbelievable. And we got kicked out. We knocked out of the playoffs right before Thanksgiving, so everybody was gone for Thanksgiving, and that's where I really first time I ever got homesick.
Yeah.
And I was calling my mum and dad collect every day. And I went home for Christmas that year. Christmas Day, I got an envelope put on my plate, and it was a £2,500 phone bill. My mum and dad picking up my collect calls. they were
No
like,
way.
they're like, so here's your chance. You decide you're going to go back and you're going to play, or you're going to stay because you have to stop phoning us every day. Collect. So I was like, oh, fair enough. So we learned a trick. I'd call them and say something and hang up, and then they'd phone me back, so we didn't have to pay the collect charges. But yeah, I
How
mean,
long? Yeah, sorry, no, on you go.
no, I was just saying that first year was. I mean, the whole time was great, but that first year was just such an experience that it was just unbelievable. Like it was just phenomenal, and I would never change it for anything.
When you're there, can you see a development? Obviously,
Disappeared there.
you're still on scholarship. Can you see a progression into making a career out of it?
So here it's like, yes, but even though I say that the sport here is a women's sport and the players that get to go play on the national team, they do well financially. The kids that come out of college and maybe go sign like their first year contract, they're not the money on the women's side. The money that they get paid is like borderline, poverty line. So they don't get paid well. Some of them, I think they're trying to change it. Some of the kids, stay with host families and get paid like not a lot of money, like maybe 14,000-15,000 pounds a year, it seems like a lot, but here and the cost of living here is like through the roof. So it's not a lot, if that makes sense to you. But it definitely, I mean, the women's game here is so the difference is the women's game here, the athletes play soccer, right? And that's what they do. And so they find these big, strong, athletic kids. You see it all when you play college soccer. I want to go play at Penn State. Penn State's huge, right? And I'm like, it's going to be a bit of a. Like I tell them, go look at their roster online and see what those kids are, and see how do you compare into that. And some kids get it, and they'll go and look and be like, oh, okay, I've got no chance. So it's definitely there. But so the leagues that are here pretty much determine that. And majority of the kids that are going to go play on a scholarship are playing it in, like it's called ECNL, it's Elite Club National League on the women's side. Those are the kids that are going to make it. I should say just them, but chances are it's just them. And then once they've graduated, they go into what's called a draft system. Typical Americans, draft system. Everyone gets drafted. And that's it. They go on. There's a couple of kids I know that got drafted, and there's a couple of kids I know that are good players that went to play in Finland and Sweden and didn't get drafted, but are like solid quality players. So the draft system's insane. I can't even explain it to you because I don't understand it.
Don't understand it yourself. How much longer did the playing career really take off, or was coaching always sort of the pathway you were eventually going to go down?
So I was playing for semi-pro for a team out here called the Majestics, and it was when you say semi-pro, it was a pretty high level. Everyone that played on it was all Division 1 athletes, and they were quality players. And then it came down to visa situation, so I couldn't do both. And the company that I was working for, who had my visa, were like, I mean, they made us work, like, right. So that interfered with my ability to go do that. So it was almost a choice, like, hey, you can continue and do this, but you're going to have to figure out a visa for yourself, and they're not going to help you, or you can stay here and have your visa and make money. So unfortunately, that's the path I went. So I've been very fortunate in my career of coaching, but yeah, that was my choice. I still played like women's league and co-ed leagues and stuff like that, but it was not. I'm still as overly as competitive as I was then. So actually I had to stop playing because I'm getting old now. So can't fight the way I used to.
How hard is it that decision almost really to stop playing? Yeah.
I was still quite young, and actually I came home when I finished school, and I came home and I was playing for a team called Dundee, right? And they were somewhat affiliated with the men's club. But we actually practiced in Stirling, and I don't know. Don't ask me why. I can't tell you. I have no idea. And I used to work in a bar, and a girl that drank in the bar came in, and she was like, "Oh, you're back! I remember you played football. You should come play for my team." And I was like, "Sure, I'd love to." So I came back, and I went to play with them, and played with some like top-notch players. And there was talk then, like, you know, because I came back, I was fit, I was healthy, and there was like, there was talk then that I might get a chance. But I also had been offered this job here, and so it was like, and I stayed longer in Scotland than I was supposed to, and the guys were calling about like, hey, you're supposed to start. Of course, that was before cell phones, so a couple of times they got my mum, which was great because she was like, oh, I don't know what she's doing. And then eventually one day they got me. My mum, I came home, and my mum was like, you have to make a decision. She's like, we will always be here. This will always be here. You have to make a decision. Don't want you to have any regrets. So I was like, so I came back, and I worked for a company called Britannia that was based actually here where I am right now. And it'd been an unbelievable experience, but I definitely like being home and being a little bit more older and having that experience of being here and playing. And I thought it was pretty decent. So, but it was good. But then come back here and doing it here a little bit, and then having to make that decision was hard because I was like maybe 24. So it was hard. And then some part of me was like, oh, maybe I should just go home. But I remember how proud my mum was of me being here. I didn't want to do that to her. So I stayed. And here I am.
Absolutely.
And still here.
It was proved to be the right decision. So as we say, you do get into the coaching. How does that all come around?
So the company I worked for was a coaching company, and so both the companies, I came over a company called Challenger. There was the first summer I came over with, and I got my scholarship, and then the second company I came over with was a company called Britannia, and their whole model was bringing British people over and sending them out to all these different camps and communities. It was insane. I mean, some of the stories are like these British guys showing up. It was just hilarious. I don't know how PG this is, so we'll just keep them for another day. but yeah, and I loved it. You know, I was around like a whole bunch of British guys driving around the States, drinking, partying, and coaching camps for kids that, you know, this was like a novelty thing. But then as the sport in this country grew and the money involved in it grew, and I suppose the generations changed, where kids that had played it now were getting old enough to coach it and be involved in it. Those kind of models are gone now. So those guys are, you know, scattered across this country doing other things. And I was working for Britannia, and I think they went bankrupt. They were bought out by another company in California, and I was working for a huge club here in Northern Virginia area, and I was making a ton of money. And it was a choice. Like they were like, you know, we have your visa, and we want you to move to, you know, the West Coast, which I kind of wanted to do, but the amount of money that I was making was like, well,
Okay.
I want to stay here. So I was like, I want to stay here. So I had to get my whole visa situation sorted out. So I got my visa situation sorted out, and so I was on my own, and it was unbelievable. And I worked for a guy who was actually Welsh, who was the technical director of the club I worked at, and he was great. He was like my mentor in the education, and he was super into education, not just coaching education, but you know, just education in general and making sure. And he pushed me to do a lot of different things, get my coaching licenses. And I remember somebody telling me to make sure I did them when I was young and not try to do it when I was older. And that was the best advice I think I've ever had. So I stuck in. I did my coaching education. I got my A license by the time I was 31. So that was my goal. So I was very fortunate that I was around a lot of really, really smart people, a lot smarter than I am. So they kind of helped guide me and push me in the right direction.
So you do, and you have that a plethora of badges, and you're regarded so highly, especially over in Virginia. You've had a varied roles. So you've been not just a coach, you've been technical director as well at clubs. What's that sort of like? What's that sort of role difference?
So the club that I was just at, I oversaw the entire club, like from the the grassroots level, the little kids. Here you have two pathways. You have recreational level, whereas kids, and I hate to use this, kids play it for fun, and it's usually a parent volunteer that do it, or you have the called travel, more elite pathway where the coaches are paid, the coaches are licensed, and just the whole environment is very, very different. And the kids train 3-4 times a week, whereas the rec kids train 1 to 2 times a week. So I oversaw all of that. The club that I was at, we had about 3,000 players. Between our rec program is probably about 2,000, probably about 2,500, and our travel program is about 500-600 kids. So, and the club that I was at when I first came to Virginia, Loudon, they had 15,000 players. So, like a revolving door of, it was like every season, the rec program is huge. So I oversaw all how the club was structured, what those kids did on the field or were supposed to do on the field, and what coaches were employed. Oversaw the coaching education for them, whether it would be me that put on the sessions myself or brought someone from the outside and try to guide those guys. You know, we put together a curriculum that they had to follow to make sure that everything was somewhat structured and we kind of looked alike when we did things. So,
As you say, it's extremely different to how it is here. As you say,
yeah.
for starters, obviously, the costs. So that adds a whole different pressure that perhaps here we can't really understand. So here, all we say is, kids should play for enjoyment, and it's all about friendships and just playing for fun. But when when the cost is involved, as you say, and there's pressure from parents because they're paying a lot of money, what's that like? How highly can you still value enjoyment?
So we have that conversation a lot, because it's hard. And like from a coaching perspective, you want to go in deep and you're like, you know what, I want these kids to be better. I want them to enjoy this. I want them to love the sport. But then you turn around and look, and there's parents, like we have tryouts this week for these kids to make these different teams. And if I was to take a video of this and show people, you would think I'm lying. Like parents just like standing on the sideline, like marching up and down, making sure, because you recognize which fields are which. Like here's the top field, here's the middle, here's the bottom field, and you can tell who the bottom field is, you can tell who the top field is, and people wanting their kid to be on that top field. Like I just had a conversation with a coach yesterday, trying to point him in the right direction. He's a kid that is 10, and she wants to stay on the top team. She's not good enough to be on the top team. but she'll stay on the top team if he puts her in goal. I'm like, she's 10, she shouldn't be going in goal. She needs to play on the field. She needs to play. She needs to learn how to play the game. And he's like, well, that's what she wants to do. I was like, well, you have to be the adult here, make the decision that that's not what you're going to do. You're going to put her on a team where it's developmentally appropriate for her so that she still loves and enjoys the game. So she's not going to go at 10 years old, be stuck in goal for however long. And then when she gets to 13, 14, she's not going to play anymore. So, but having these conversations with people, some of them just don't get it. And guys are just, it's win, 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 win. And some of it is the mentality of just the person, and some of it is the mentality of just the people that you're around. I'm paying you $2,000 a year. You know, why are we not winning? And it's like, but the team are getting better. You have to see the progress, but we didn't win. I know, you're right, but we're getting better. And it's a lot of pressure. It's
clash of cultures, yeah.
Well, there's also a huge clash of cultures because I don't want to say it's a rich person's sport, but there's definitely that element to it. I think it's changed a lot. Like back in the day when Mia Hamm and everything, it was definitely wasn't attainable for a lot of people. But now in this country, you know, you got the Hispanic part of it, where the Hispanic culture, it's their sport and they're coming in, but there's not a lot of money with a lot of those kids. So we actually, the club I'm at right now, have a scholarship program, and it's something like close to $100,000 a year that go to scholarships for kids coming through. I mean, that's insane, right? Can you imagine? You wouldn't have that in Scotland. You're like, it's just that's like someone's livelihood. It's madness. And then there's that clash of culture as well. So it's just like super different. But yeah, like changing people's mentality about how things developmentally should be done, and try to do it where you're still finding success on the field and you're still winning to keep yourself on a job is hard. And you know, you talk about Brendan Rodgers sitting at Leicester. This is what it's like right here.
Absolutely. Yeah. So you've got that, like you say, the younger kids and the grassroots sort of side of things as well. But what about that older age group when you're dealing with, you know, 12 to like 19 or whatever? That's a really like fragile stage. You're dealing with little girls.
So it's hard, right? And we speak about it all the time, like just because they're going through so many changes, like physically and mentally themselves, and then being in this environment and trying to figure out what they want to do, like as a person, and just how that football looks. And it's hard. Like one of the kids that in our program, we just had to move her from the top team that she's been on for when she was 8. Like they start at 8. So she's just got cut from a team that she's 8, she's 15. You know what I mean? Can you imagine that? Like, this is where her friends are. And so she's just, it's hard. It's hard to deal. And those kids are hard to deal with anyway, because they're middle school and they're just awful, because they're going through puberty and they're just awful people at that point. But, you know, it's pretty heartbreaking. And, you know, you've got parents crying, like, because their kid's been cut, and you're like, I'm the worst person in the world. So it's hard. It's hard to deal with.
How many girls especially do you lose around that time? You know, like you say, if you've been in that top scene from 8 to 15, like how many do you really lose during those vital years? Because like you say, the disappointment creeps in, or like you say, their body's changing. It's hard to maintain like that athletic sort of a build, and then
a lot. You lose a lot. A lot of it through. So here is, you know, you want to be at that top level, you're training 3-4 nights a week. So you're giving up that social aspect. And some kids are here playing for teams that are over an hour drive, right? So on a weeknight, you've got practice. Just say your practice is at 5 o'clock. You have to leave your house at 3:30, get to practice for an hour and a half, come back. You know what I mean? And then you go to do homework. And then where's your social life? Where's your interaction with your friends? Where's your let loose? There's none of that. So we usually between the ages of, I'd say, 13, 14, 15, when kids start to go to high school, and that more social life becomes more, and there's offered other sports that maybe are not big at a younger age, like volleyball, which I think is a weird sport. Volleyball, field hockey's now coming big here, lacrosse is big here. When they get access to that, then we start to lose them for that, because there's not the pressure of, and it's just something different. And then they find out what boys are, and then it's chaos. So we lose a lot. So they say that right now in the States, there's over 4 million youth players, and it never changes. Like it's a stagnant 4 million players, and it never changes because, and there's lots of looking at the cause. They say, well, coaching is part of it. You talk about, so coaching in Scotland, right? There's 90% of the time you could go into a pub, find a guy, and he could somewhat come and do a decent job of coaching a group of kids because he knows the game, right? Yeah. Can't do that here. So a lot of it is for these younger kids on this rec side. You find somebody's dad who was late to the meeting, and all of a sudden now he's coaching a bunch of 10-year-olds, and he has no idea what he's doing. He doesn't know anything about the sport. He's only ever played football, basketball, whatever. So he gets chucked in. So you lose a lot of those kids because the experience isn't great. But then you go to the travel and elite side, and you lose a lot of those kids because they get burnt out. They're done. They're tired. They want to go and have fun with a friend on a Friday night, and not we have a sleepover ban. You can't have a sleepover the night before a game because you're a disaster the next day. And so things like that, they miss out on parties. And I've had people, like, we had a kid that played for us, and we were a decent team. We were young. Her family paid for her to stay with someone so she wouldn't miss a game, and they all went to a wedding somewhere. Like, ditched the kids, so they all went to the wedding to make sure she didn't miss her game. Can you imagine that? It's just things like that. I just think I have to laugh at it, but it's. Don't get me wrong. When I was first here and I was into it, I was like, oh my god, yeah, we can't miss the game. You've got to be here. But the more I've got into, so I do coaching education as well. So the more I get into coaching education, I kind of see the backside of it, and some of the the science stuff behind of why we're losing kids and why this. And I'm like, oh my god, I actually did that. This is embarrassing. I was that person. I'm sorry. It's craziness.
Just what you're
the
saying
sports over here are.
Yeah, sorry, and just what you're saying there with the coaching education. What are you learning through that? Like, as you say, the whole approach and everything. It's just, as you say over there, the sports are totally crazy.
So so for me, the coaching education. So like I said, I did my A license, and I thought, right, that's it, I'm sorted. But then I realised that I actually knew nothing, and so then after that, there was a whole education for me. So I got into coaching education, and I'm actually a grassroots instructor for US soccer. So I've got to be around people who are like doctors of psychology and who have put a lot of why we do things, why we don't do things. And like the big kick here for the grassroots level is now a thing called play, practice, play, where the kids will come in and you let them play, then you have a little bit of a practice of whatever subject you're trying to teach them, and then they'll come back and play again. And they're trying to do that because, like here, you're not going to walk down the street and see kids play soccer. You're going to walk down the street and see them play baseball or football or whatever it is. So I try to bring that street soccer element into it, and just learning like why kids leave, what the environment should look like and how to keep them engaged. So I've learned a lot more about that over the past couple of years than what I'd ever really thought about. So I think for me, that's helped me be a better coach. It's funny, I actually spoke to a guy, he's like, you've got soft in your old age. And I'm like, I'm just more experienced in understanding what it should look like and what it should look like. And he's like, no, you've got soft. You can call it what you like, and maybe I have got soft, but this is, I see now what it should look like, and they should have fun, and we shouldn't put that pressure on them, and they're still growing and they're still developing, and that's a huge part of it. He's like, nah, you got soft. All right, fair enough.
Do you not find that odd in the sense that, like, even over here, obviously, in recent years, Scotland, we've reached the World Cup, and a lot of that's all down to the impact really that Shelley Kerr's actually made. But over in the States, the women's games always really has been up there at top international level, and World Cups and everything. And you look at the plethora of players, and do you not find it odd in the sense that it's not more of a mainstream sport, considering that you look at it over here and we get buzzing that we've even reached the World Cup for the women, or the Euros, or we just miss out on the Euros. But for there, the success has always been there. It's not just Megan Rapinoe's turned up and now there's an attraction. US soccer has always been there for the women.
It has, but I feel like now. So when I first came here, you couldn't get it on TV. There was no soccer on TV. I remember when I was in college and Celtic and Rangers were playing, and there was a Celtic pub, and bizarrely, really coincidentally, my roommate in college her family were Scottish. We were actually born in the same hospital a couple of years apart. She was a couple of years older than me. Really bizarre. But her dad moved out. He worked for an oil company, and he moved to Texas. So her mum, dad, and her older brother were all full on Scottish. She was full on American. I think she was born in Scotland and came over to the States when she was like 3 or 4. So she was full on American. And so her brother, huge Celtic fan, would come pick me up and we would go to drive. And it was like 6 o'clock in the morning, kickoff time. And we would drive an hour to go watch this game. And this is the only place you had to pay $20 to get in just to watch the game. It was craziness. And then when I left Texas and I came to the Northern Virginia area, there was a bar called Summers. I don't think it's there anymore. And same thing, you'd pay $20 to get in, and they'd have different TVs up, and it would be full of like Brits. Didn't show any Scottish stuff, only showed English Premiership stuff. And you watch whatever game you wanted. Even at the 2002 World Cup, it was the same thing. I think after the 99 World Cup, when the women won here, and it was shown on TV, and there was like 90-something thousand people in the stadium, I think a lot of companies were like, hang on a minute, there's a market here.
There's and
that's when they started to plough money into it. The money had already been ploughed into it in a collegiate sense because of, and hopefully I'll explain this right, so there's a thing called Title IX, which was, my understanding of it was to have equal sports in college for male and female athletes. So Title IX came in, so that was where scholarships were added. And one of the sports that they added was soccer. So that's why women's soccer was always so big here, because of that. That's why you got your Mia Hamms and your Julie Fowdies and those types of players. But then it grew, right? It's still not the market that you would think, but it's getting there. So, and it depends on the market. Like out in the West Coast, up in Seattle, I mean, they get like 25,000 people to the women's games. You know, here in Northern Virginia, where you can't swing a cat for hitting another soccer club, they're getting 4,000 or 5,000 people to the women's games. So it's a little, I don't know, just the mentality is just a little bit different. Yeah, it's just, I think once companies realized that the money was there and they started plowing money into it and getting money back from it, they were like, we've got it here, boys. We've sorted this out. And you know, I think, it's to watch Scotland. Like I was actually at the World Cup in 2019, and we went to the Scotland game, and it was like tears to your eyes. I was like, this is it. Like, we should be here. We deserve to be here. I just like here the amount of money that is put behind it from parents, number one, to put their kids into these elite programs. Number two, the amount of money that goes into college scholarships is just on another level. And the marketing and the money behind that, I just don't know if we as a country are ever going to compete with that. So hopefully one of these days.
One of these days, exactly. I've thoroughly enjoyed chatting with you, Vicky. It's just amazing, like you say. We were joking earlier that COVID was like a different world. This is totally like a different world. Here, it's just so simple that I know even now. But like I grew up, you play cowboy outside, and it's just the basics. But out there, the money put into football is unbelievable, or soccer.
It's mind blowing. Talking about the things that there's a guy that I work with now. He's a Nigerian guy. He played. His name is Harry Okudu. I don't know if I'm pronouncing that right. And he played in England. Yeah, apparently he was an unbelievable player. And every day he's almost 80. And he's still coaching, and he still loves it. And every day I bump into him, he's like, "Oh, Vicky, can you believe what we have to teach these kids? Because they just don't play, right? And the things that you have to coach that you would be mind blown about." And the money that people pay for you to coach their kids, like private training. Can you teach my kid how to do a throw-in properly? I'll pay you $100. No, I'm not teaching you get what are you talking about? So just little things like that. People, the money is insane. I mean, it's great. It's been great for me because I've managed to, work hard and get a career out of it. But it's like I went to a few years ago. I went to watch my nephew play, and it was somebody's dad coaching the team, and it was just. I was like, this is insane. And it was cool. Like, I love watching him play, but it was just so different and so, I don't know, the dads were just stand watch, and I stood with it was a totally different environment. But yeah,
Crazy.
money talks.
Money does talk. Well, Vicky, thank you so much for joining us. Like I say, I thoroughly enjoyed the chat, and all the best in everything that you're doing this season. And I will be jealous of the fact that you're getting to go to the pub and everything. I like that a hell of a lot quicker than I am. So you enjoy that.
It's going to be about 75 degrees today, so I'm going to go outside and sit on my back deck and enjoy that.
Fantastic. Just rub it in. We've got pouring rain. We get it.
Okay, well, hopefully I'll be home this summer to experience some of that pouring rain, and not the pubs though.
Absolutely. Vicky Hall, thank you so much for joining me. Thank you.
Right. Have a good one. Thank you.
Cheers.